So good morning. This is the fourth video and the third topic, looking at these different things from Jekyll and Hyde really closely. Today we're going to be looking at setting and symbolism. We've already looked at the themes of science and religion, we've looked at secrecy and reputation, and we've looked at structure and narrative. So today we're going to have a look at a few different things here, pulling into focus some context and just catching little snippets from the text of different weather phenomenon that happens and having a look really carefully at the symbolism of those things. So firstly, the novel's settings are mostly dark and foggy. I'll be using the little cloud icon to show you things about the weather, and then the city icon to be referencing things about London. So the background and the context then, Victorian London. Victorian London was known for its smoke. It was so dense that sometimes people fell into the Thames. Added into this, the industrialisation of London, the smog and the chemicals in the air, the pollution. This could have been a typical street here on the screen where you couldn't see very much in front of you. And maybe when the fog really rolls in, as it suggests it does in the first chapter of this book, you couldn't really see where you were going very easily. This is going to be a really important point for this. So Stevenson emphasises the darkness or the partial darkness in the novel. Even when it's daytime, it's under some kind of cloud of darkness. The less respectable parts of London are especially associated with darkness. For example, in Soho, where Hyde has his sort of second house, the light is always changing. Utterson sees degrees and hues of twilight, a haggard shaft of daylight, and changing glimpses of the streets. This symbolises the narrative as a whole. Only parts of the truth can be seen at any one time, which is what we were looking at last week with our structure and narrative topic. See, Stevenson also repeatedly mentions the fog. It's so dense that it covers the whole streets, making them ideal places for secrecy. The fog actively works against the characters at times. When Utterson visits Soho, it cuts him off from his surroundings. And Stevenson also uses the fog for dramatic effect and purposes. What could these be? Well, the first thing could be to isolate the characters from each other. See, if they're all getting slightly different perspectives and they don't really join up all of their pieces into the puzzle, then that's going to prolong the mystery, intensify the suspense. And so that's really important that we understand that. And it also restricts their views of the situation, what's really happening. And so Utterson can't really get a grip on what's happening until the end. So fog also symbolises mystery. For example, the lecture theatre at Jekyll's house is described as foggy. The fact that the fog seems to have come indoors somehow represents how deeply Jekyll has hidden his secret. So that's something that's really interesting to think about. Now think about this. If the fog can roll in suddenly and cover the whole city in this pall of darkness, the fog can also roll out again quickly. And when the fog rolls out quickly, the bright moon is in the air. And this is the setting for the most shocking event that I've just put on the screen there. And I've chosen this video because you can see in the background that full moon. And Stevenson uses the moon to highlight parts of the setting. And so just as the fog conceals things in the novel, when the fog is withdrawn, it can also expose secrets as well in the novel. And there you can see the maid in the top right hand corner witnessing the event, whereas perhaps if the fog would have concealed the event, it would have perhaps gone unnoticed by some until the morning. No witnesses. But the moon is really important here, and this scene is described as being brilliantly lit by the full moon, which makes it more dramatic, as if it's under some kind of spotlight. The moon is also used to add a spooky atmosphere. In The Last Night, the moon is described as lying on her back, and the personification here makes it seem as if the whole world has been turned upside down by Jekyll's secret. Stevenson presents London's streets as threatening places. The streets of London are presented as dangerous. Both of Hyde's antics take place there, if you can recall the attacks that happen. That one with Danvers Carew, and the first one in chapter 1, the trampling of the poor child. Stevenson carefully builds a nightmarish version of London that is halfway between reality and fiction. Well, why does he do that? Why doesn't he just refer to real places? We know that Cavendish Square, where Lanyon lives, is a renowned place that medics would live, but there are little parts that are sort of made up, or they are unclear, and for example, Jekyll lives on some square or other. He does include specific details about locations, but then he also mentions place names that don't exist in London, like Gaunt Street. And this makes it more frightening for a Victoria reader because it's familiar yet mysterious. The streets are often linked to horror and nightmares. Utterson has a nightmare. Okay, so this is little Utterson on the floor there. He's lying down. He's having this nightmare, and this is what he dreams about. He imagines a terrifying city of labyrinths. So just read the quotation. The figure in these two phases haunted the lawyer all night, and if at any time he dozed over, it was but to see it glide more stealthily through sleeping houses, or move the more swiftly and still the more swiftly, even to dizziness, through wider labyrinth of lamp-lighted city, and at every street corner crush a child and leave her screaming. So this is the nightmare that he has after Enfield tells him the story from chapter 1. Now, why is this bit important? This is going to be important later on in this video, but I really want you to note down that highlighted section of the quotation there, through wider labyrinth. Now, a labyrinth is a maze-like sort of structure. If you've ever seen that film Labyrinth, you'll know what I mean. There's sort of like a network of underground tunnels and passages that kind of make this confusing maze. And this is what Utterson imagines, and this is quite important when we combine this with the idea of fog and concealment. And actually, when he wakes up and he goes to Soho, Soho is described as a district of some city in a nightmare, as if Utterson's visions have become real. Jekyll's house we've thought about before as being really important for this idea of symbolism, because like Jekyll himself, his house has two sides which are connected. As we can see in the front there, down at the front the bottom right hand corner, we've got the main grand entrance to Jekyll's house, and I think this is a really helpful picture because it kind of points out the back door. And it's got the little courtyard. If you just like kind of wander your eyes up, perhaps I'll highlight it on the screen here, and you can see this is the main door to Jekyll's house, the grand exterior to the posh part of the house, if you like. And then there's an adjoining corridor. This isn't a separate house, I don't think. I think this is part of Jekyll's house, but it's kind of like a corridor that connects his main house to this idea here, and it leads into this part of his house, the back part, the laboratory and the cabinet as well, where he does all of his kind of shady scientific experiments. But then we've got this archway here, which I think is quite an important part, because this must be where Utterson and Enfield walk. They're in this courtyard area here when they look up and see these three windows. See 1, 2, 3, and Jekyll is in one of those windows. So that's quite an interesting diagram there, just to think about Jekyll's house and the layout. And we know that it's a symbolic place. The respectable main house is at the front and has an air of wealth, but through a yard at the back there's a laboratory with a back door that's blistered and disdained. This symbolises Jekyll's personality. He's outwardly respectable but inwardly sinful. Keep remembering that that there's two sides, the respectability versus the reality. The side of Hyde and his personality is connected to Jekyll, but he keeps it hidden away. The laboratory also symbolises Jekyll's shame. He transforms it from a place of ordinary science into one of dark experiments. At the end of the novel, he locks himself in the laboratory and dies there, as if he cannot face the world's judgment for his misdeeds. Jekyll's house becomes more sinister as Hyde becomes more powerful. It becomes a house of voluntary bondage. This suggests that Jekyll had chosen to lock himself in the house, just as he had tried to lock Hyde away within himself. He sees the house as his protection, where he can hide his secrets. Some other objects have symbolic meaning too. The possessions in Hyde's house in Soho belong to Jekyll. These expensive objects are a symbol of the respectable gentleman in the rougher parts of the city. Think about the cane and how symbolic the cane is. The cane is used to murder Carew. I wonder if there's a link here to the character in the Bible of Cain, Abel's brother. These are supposed to be the first two sons of Adam and Eve that are born after they've sinned, after they've entered. They've been thrown out of the garden, and Cain kills Abel in a sort of brutish, horrific way. And I wonder if that's just a slight reference to that. And there is a little mention, isn't there, in the book about Cain's heresy. I adhere to Cain's heresy, says Utterson at the start, meaning that he doesn't want to talk about things that are unpleasant. So perhaps that could be symbolic there. But it was more symbolically, perhaps, it was a gift from Utterson to Jekyll. It could be perhaps seen as a symbol of the Victorian gentleman, but it also demonstrates Stevenson's point that civilised people are capable of violent crimes. Think about the chequebook. Jekyll's chequebook initially gets him out of difficulty. He pays off the family of the girl he trampled as Hyde. However, after murdering Carew, he burns the chequebook. This shows that money can't help him to deal with a scandal on this scale. And also the mirror, as we've already thought about in class, is a symbolic object. The fact that it can swivel. The icon on the screen doesn't really do it justice. It's a cheval glass that can tilt on its hinges to accommodate for the changing shape of Jekyll. Jekyll's reflection as Hyde emphasises the fact that Hyde is actually his double. So thinking about some of the questions that I've given you on Frog to think about, this last slide will help you to be able to piece together some of these ideas. So there's a few things going on here. Fog conceals unpleasant things, okay, so it's used to conceal and to shroud things in mystery. When you combine that with the maze-like city, it's a very disturbing potential, because actually Hyde could be on any street corner. Hyde's not the kind of person you want to meet in a dark alley, but Stevenson's description makes it sound like he could be in any dark alley. And with the dense fog closing in, you wouldn't even hear him coming. So Stevenson is very clever in the way that he combines these things, the setting and the antagonist, to create fear. Hyde becomes a play on words, essentially. He is hiding in the obscured city. So we've finished our video, a very short one for you today as promised, and that's my analysis of the setting and symbolism in this book. Thank you.